I'm using a throwaway account for this post. Me, 23-year-old female, and my boyfriend, 25-year-old male, moved into our new home last November. Our neighbors are a single mom, Sarah, 35-year-old female, and her two boys, 7-year-old male and 12-year-old male. And when we first moved in, Sarah was very sweet and welcoming. Her sons would say hi to us sometimes as well. As we're in England, you can probably guess we don't get a great deal of sunny weather. Recently, though, it's gotten better and we've had a few hot days. A couple of weekends back, my boyfriend and I were enjoying a particularly sunny day sitting in our garden. We could hear Sarah's kids playing in their garden next door but didn't mind until a jet of water came over the fence and hit me. It took me by surprise, and within a few seconds, 2 jets were being shot over the fence and spraying into our garden. I went upstairs to look at what the boys were doing. I saw they both had huge water guns and were still aiming them over the fence and shooting water all over our garden furniture and plants. I came downstairs to see my boyfriend calling over the fence, saying the boys' names and asking them to please stop spraying water. The boys went quiet and went away, but no more than 2 minutes later were doing it again. We were both frustrated, and I went next door and rang the bell. Sarah answered, and I told her what her kids had been doing and asked if she'd make them stop. I thought she'd be understanding, but she seemed really offended and told me I was overreacting to kids being kids. I tried to explain myself further, but she told me that while she'd tell them to stop, she wouldn't police her children playing and said it was only water and wouldn't do any damage. Honestly, I don't do well with confrontations, and her response was so different from what I'd expected, I kind of froze. I could see her kids over her shoulder watching from the hall, still holding their water guns. Sarah closed the door on me and I just went home. Her boys kept playing outside, but they didn't spray water over the wall again. The next day I saw Sarah and said hi, but she ignored me. I felt a bit awkward and let it be, until later she sent me a long text telling me she'd ignored me because she was upset by what I'd done the previous day. She said she felt I'd been a Karen by stopping her kids playing and making her out to be a bad mother. I was so confused by that because I'd never done those things. I had just wanted them to stop spraying water in our garden. I don't care what they do in theirs, and honestly, being called a Karen was hurtful and makes me think she missed the point of why I even said anything and is being vindictive. I've spoken to other people about it, and some have actually sided with Sarah, saying that kids probably meant no harm, and I likely embarrassed Sarah. I was sure in my stance before, but now I'm beginning to doubt myself, and I'm wondering if I was in the wrong. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1 said it was only water and wouldn't do any damage. Be interesting to find out whether she would say that if it was you who soaked her when she was fully dressed. Not that I'm suggesting you buy a hose, of course, heaven forbid. Purely hypothetical speculation, you understand. By stopping her kids from playing. You didn't stop them from playing. You stopped them from playing inconsiderately, deliberately, pissing you off. She wouldn't police her children's play. Then she damn well should. It's part of parenting. Making her out to be a bad mother. I mean, yes, she is. Not the idiot. Comment 2. Not the idiot. My neighbor's kids accidentally got me once, and they were all really apologetic. That's fine. Her kids were deliberately spraying you. That's not okay. I dread the summer because of all the kids with super soakers, water balloons, etc., and the inevitable spray me when I'm using the hose, which if their parents say okay and they're not in school uniform or whatever, why not? But a part of me enjoys the squeal. You know the one where the kid has just jumped into the paddling pool, and that water is a lot colder than they thought. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks so much for all your comments and support on my last post. It really means a lot to me. I wanted to give you all an update on what's been happening over the past few days. So after my last post, I decided to try and smooth things over with Sarah. I baked some cookies and went over to her house, hoping we could have a friendly chat and put the whole water gun incident behind us. When she answered the door, she seemed surprised to see me, but invited me in. We sat down in her living room, and I apologized if I had come across as too harsh before, explaining that I just wanted to find a solution that worked for everyone. Sarah listened and then apologized too, saying she may have overreacted a bit. We ended up having a really nice talk, and I thought things were back on track. However, the next day I was out in my garden watering the plants when I suddenly heard loud music blasting from Sarah's yard. I peeked over the fence and saw her sons running around with their friends, all armed with water guns. They were spraying each other and laughing, but then I noticed they were also deliberately aiming at our garden, soaking the furniture and plants I had just watered. I couldn't believe it was happening again. I went inside, unsure of what to do. I didn't want to confront Sarah and risk another argument, but I also couldn't just let her kids keep ruining our garden. My boyfriend suggested we invite Sarah and her boys over for a barbecue that weekend, hoping that a friendly gesture might encourage them to be more respectful. I thought it was worth a shot. That Saturday, Sarah and her sons came over, and we all had a nice time grilling burgers and chatting. The boys played soccer in our yard and seemed to be behaving well, but just as we were finishing up lunch, I heard a commotion and looked over to see the boys had turned the hose on our dog, who was barking and running around in a panic. My boyfriend rushed over and grabbed the hose, telling the boys to cut it out. Sarah just laughed it off, saying, "Boys will be boys." I was shocked that she wasn't even going to reprimand them. Later, as I was cleaning up, I overheard Sarah talking to her sister on the phone in our living room. She was complaining about me, saying I was uptight and needed to loosen up. She even made a joke about how her boys put me in my place with the hose. I was so hurt and angry. Here I was trying to be a good neighbor, and she was bad-mouthing me in my own home. I didn't say anything to Sarah then, but the next morning I found a crude drawing tucked under our doormat. It showed a stick figure with long hair, clearly meant to be me, getting sprayed by water guns and crying. The words "Crybaby Karen" were scrawled underneath. I knew instantly Sarah's sons were behind it, and I'd had enough. I marched over to Sarah's and knocked on the door, drawing in hand. When she answered, I held it up and asked if she knew anything about it. She rolled her eyes and said it was just a harmless prank, but I could see her fighting back a smirk. I lost my cool then, and we ended up in a full-blown shouting match on her front lawn. I told her I was done trying to be friendly and that she needed to control her kids. She called me a busybody and said I had no right to tell her how to parent. We were both so worked up, airing grievances that had apparently been building for months. In the end, Sarah stormed inside and slammed the door. I went home feeling shaky and on the verge of tears. My boyfriend hugged me and said we'd figure it out. But I'm at a loss. I don't want to keep fighting with Sarah, but I also can't keep letting her and her kids walk all over me. I'm starting to dread going out into my own yard. To make matters worse, I found out from another neighbor that Sarah has been spreading rumors about me, telling people I'm unstable and out to get her. Now I feel like everyone on the block is gossiping behind my back. It's gotten so bad that I'm considering selling the house and moving, even though we've barely been here a year. I just don't know how to resolve this without things escalating even further. I know this was a long update, but I wanted to give you all the full story. If anyone has any advice, I'm all ears. I'm really struggling with what to do next. Thanks for reading and for all your support. Am I the idiot for throwing cigarette butts back into my neighbor's garden after she denied they were hers? So our neighbor, 23-year-old female, is an absolute nightmare. We got along at first, but once the following situation happened, she turned volatile and unhinged. Jane is a single mother with a 5-year-old and a 4-month-old. It's just our two houses connected, and our front gardens are connected with no fence or wall boundary. It's important to note that she has family and friends very locally who come around a lot. So a few months into living here, my partner, 29-year-old male, and I, 24-year-old female, go to tidy our front garden and notice there are loads of cigarette ends. Neither of us smoke, and neither does Jane, but we have seen the mom, who visits a lot, smoke out the front of the house and usually use a cup as an ashtray. We assume she has thrown them on the floor, or the cup has been knocked over and the wind has blown them into our garden. It's annoying, but not a big deal. We look closer and there are a lot of cigarette ends, not just a few. So I politely text Jane informing her of the situation and ask if she can come and clear them up, as there are quite a lot. She replies bluntly, saying they aren't hers. I reply that I know she doesn't smoke, but we know her mom does. And I mention again that I know it was probably the wind blowing them, but there are quite a lot. Can she come and clear them? She says her mom doesn't smoke out the front, only the back. I say we have seen her out the front smoking. She then says her mom puts them down the drain, which is illegal where we are. I reply asking her to please just come and sort them out, and she never replies. We don't put a time limit on it, but we leave it a week and no one comes to clear them up. We contact our local council about them in case it happens again, and they say to take pictures, bag them, and count them, and then return them to Jane. So that's what we do. There are 42 cigarette ends. My partner, I'm disabled, goes outside to clear them up after a week. I was standing near him, and about halfway through, Jane leaves the house with a guy in the pram. They both stop, stare at us, and then just walk off. When we finished, taking pictures, etc., we write on the bag, 42 cigarette ends, seal it, Ziploc bag, and throw it over the back garden fence into their garden. A few hours later, she comes home, finds them, takes a picture, and messages me saying, "Thanks for throwing these in my garden, knowing I have children." I then point out that they were in a sealed bag and that originally they were all loose in her own garden where her child could have picked them up, eaten them, etc. And I asked her a week ago to pick them up. For additional context, Jane has always been hurtful to her kids. We've heard and seen a lot, and we were constantly contacting CPS and all sorts. So her saying we don't care about her kids is a joke because we cared more than her. I also have enough drama from this neighbor I could write a GD book. So Reddit, am I the idiot? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. It seems clear that your neighbor is perfectly awful as a parent and a neighbor, but you really shouldn't have thrown the bag over the fence like that. Still, I say not the idiot because it's really your neighbor that's TA. Comment 2. Not the idiot. I would definitely get a camera that shows them throwing trash in your yard. I would also file a complaint if possible. Littering is a crime, so maybe you can get proof of them doing it. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading my update. It's been a busy few days since my last post about the cigarette fiasco with my neighbor Jane. The day after I threw the bag of cigarette butts back into Jane's yard, I heard a loud pounding on my front door. It was Jane and she was fuming. She started screaming at me, saying I had no right to touch her property and that I was a terrible neighbor. I tried to calmly explain that the cigarettes were originally in our shared front garden and that I had asked her politely to clean them up, but she wasn't having it. She called me every name in the book and threatened to call the police on me for harassment. I was pretty shaken up by the confrontation, but I decided to stand my ground. I told Jane that if she didn't want me touching her property, then she needed to keep it on her side of the garden. I also reminded her that littering is illegal and that I had every right to report her to the council if it happened again. Jane stormed off, but the drama was far from over. Later that day, I heard a commotion coming from Jane's house. I looked out the window and saw her arguing with her mom, who had apparently come over to visit. I couldn't hear everything they were saying, but I caught bits and pieces about the cigarettes and how Jane was tired of her mom's smoking habit. It seemed like this was a recurring issue between them. The next day, I woke up to find that someone had thrown a bunch of trash into our front garden overnight. There were empty beer cans, fast food wrappers, and even a used diaper. I had a sinking feeling that Jane was behind it, but I couldn't prove it. I cleaned up the mess and decided to install a security camera to catch any future incidents. That evening, I heard Jane's baby crying for hours on end. It wasn't unusual to hear the baby cry, but this time it seemed different. The cries were more urgent and distressed. I debated whether to call CPS again, but I didn't want to make the situation worse. I felt helpless and frustrated. The following morning, I woke up to find that the security camera had been smashed overnight. I was furious. I marched over to Jane's house and confronted her about it. She played dumb and said she had no idea what I was talking about. I told her that I was done with her games and that I would be reporting her to the council and CPS for her behavior. As I was walking away, Jane's mom came out of the house. She looked tired and defeated. She apologized to me for the cigarettes and said that she had been trying to quit smoking for years, but it was a tough habit to break. She also mentioned that Jane had been struggling with postpartum depression and that she was worried about her grandkids. I suddenly felt a pang of empathy for Jane and her family. I realized that maybe there was more going on beneath the surface than I had initially thought. I decided to try a different approach. I offered to help Jane's mom find resources for quitting smoking and suggested that Jane might benefit from talking to a therapist about her depression. Jane's mom seemed grateful for the offer and said she would talk to Jane about it. I left feeling a bit more hopeful about the situation. Looking back, I realized that I may have been too quick to judge Jane and her family. While her behavior was still unacceptable, I now understand that there were underlying issues at play. I'm not excusing her actions, but I'm trying to approach the situation with more empathy and understanding. I don't know what the future holds for my relationship with Jane, but I'm hopeful that we can find a way to coexist peacefully. I'll keep you all updated if anything else happens. Thanks for reading and for all your support. Am I the idiot for confronting my guest after she kept criticizing my Chinese? Quick background. I was born and raised in the UK, but my parents are Chinese. I know how to speak Chinese since my parents' English isn't very good, but I don't know how to read or write it. I would like to say I'm pretty fluent. I am able to converse and understand others fine, and most Chinese people I knew outside of my family thought my Chinese was good, or at least better than they expected for someone raised in the UK. I do occasionally make grammar or vocabulary mistakes when I'm talking about something in Chinese, but in general conversation, others do get the gist of what I'm saying. Recently, my mom invited her friend and her daughter from China to stay at our house for a while, and I really don't like them. I speak in Chinese to accommodate them and even translate stuff for them, but whenever I make a mistake, they would double over laughing at me. I initially tried talking to my parents about it, but all they said was that they weren't exactly wrong since I did make a mistake. I wanted to confront them too, but my parents always stopped me and told me it would be rude and disrespectful to Mom's friend, and also how her daughter is just a kid. To clarify, her daughter is 19 years old. I don't really see my mom's friend that often since she spends time with my mom, but the daughter tags along with me a lot because we're the same age. But I can't ever talk to her without her ridiculing me and laughing at my Chinese when the biggest issue is just saying the wrong word or something. She also started correcting me by yelling at me the proper word to say, or the perfect pronunciation of a word if I ever slipped up. She laughs at the fact I can't read or write Chinese, and it just kept building up since my parents told me not to say anything. Otherwise, she might cry. I eventually lost it when she yelled condescendingly at me again because I mispronounced a word. I yelled back at her that my Chinese isn't perfect since I was born and raised in the UK, and it's rude she does this while knowing that. She tried responding with something about how she was trying to help me, but I shut it down. Eventually, she started crying and ran to her mom, which got me in trouble with my parents. To clarify, I don't mind if someone corrects me, but normally it's very non-intrusive in a conversation. With this girl, she stops the conversation to yell at me. My parents and obviously the friend and her daughter are upset, but my brother said she was rude and it was going to happen sooner or later. My brother doesn't live with me, so currently everyone in the house is all awkward and standoffish to me, and it's been making me feel slightly guilty for yelling like that. Am I the idiot? Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Speak to her in English. The girl is in the UK now. Let's see how she gets along without you translating for her, shall we? Your guest could correct you without insulting or laughing at you, or politely ignore your little mistakes entirely. She isn't your teacher and you aren't her student. But yelling at you condescendingly, this is not the way to get people to go out of their way to help you. Oh, hell no. And now she cries and runs to mama. Oh, boo-hoo, I roll my eyes. And not the idiot. Comment 2. Not the idiot. The way she was correcting you was extremely rude. The least she could have done was politely let you know that you made a mistake. I agree with your brother. It was bound to happen sooner or later, and honestly, I think the way you responded was perfect. You gave her the same treatment she's been giving you, which she deserved. And I can't believe your parents are defending her by saying she's just a kid when she's 19. That's ridiculous. Now for the update. Hey everyone, thanks for reading my update. It's been a rough few days since my last post, and I've got quite a bit to share with you all. After the big blow-up with my mom's friend's daughter, things were pretty tense around the house. My parents were still upset with me for yelling at her, even though I felt justified in standing up for myself. The girl kept giving me the cold shoulder, and her mom was shooting me dirty looks whenever we crossed paths. I tried to keep my head down and avoid any further confrontation, but it wasn't easy. One evening, I overheard my mom and her friend talking in the kitchen. They were speaking in hushed tones, but I could make out bits and pieces of their conversation. Apparently, the friend was considering cutting her visit short because of the hostile atmosphere in our home. My mom was trying to convince her to stay, apologizing profusely for my behavior. I felt a pang of guilt hearing that. I never meant to make things so uncomfortable for everyone, but at the same time, I couldn't just sit back and let myself be disrespected in my own home. I decided to try and smooth things over with the daughter, hoping that maybe we could find some common ground. The next day, I approached her while she was sitting in the living room, scrolling through her phone. I apologized for yelling at her and explained that I was just frustrated with the constant criticism of my Chinese. To my surprise, she actually listened to what I had to say. She admitted that maybe she had been a bit too harsh in her corrections and that she didn't mean to make me feel bad. We ended up having a pretty good conversation after that. She told me about her life back in China and how she was struggling to adjust to being in a new country. I shared some of my own experiences growing up as a British-born Chinese person and the challenges that came with straddling two cultures. As we talked, I realized that maybe we had more in common than I initially thought. We were both young people trying to navigate our identities and find our place in the world. It was a small breakthrough, but it felt like a step in the right direction. Unfortunately, the peace didn't last long. The next evening, I walked in on my mom and her friend having a heated argument in the living room. They were both yelling in Chinese, and even though I couldn't catch every word, I could tell it was serious. Later, my mom told me that her friend had accused me of being a bad influence on her daughter. Apparently, the girl had started questioning some of the traditional values and beliefs that her mom held dear, and she blamed me for putting those ideas in her head. I was shocked and hurt by the accusation. I had never tried to influence the girl in any way, and I certainly didn't want to cause any trouble between her and her mom, but it seemed like the damage was already done. The next morning, I woke up to find that my mom's friend and her daughter had packed their bags and left without saying goodbye. My mom was devastated, and I could tell that she blamed me for the whole thing. I tried to talk to her about it, but she just shook her head and said that I didn't understand the importance of respecting one's elders and preserving cultural traditions. It was a hard pill to swallow, but I knew that there was some truth to what she was saying. In the end, I was left feeling conflicted and unsure of where I stood. On one hand, I was glad that I had stood up for myself and refused to be disrespected in my own home. But on the other hand, I couldn't help but feel like I had let my family down and caused unnecessary drama. I guess the whole experience just reminded me of how complicated and messy life can be, especially when you're caught between two cultures and trying to find your own way. There are no easy answers, and sometimes you just have to do your best and hope that things work out in the end. Anyway, that's all I've got for now. Thanks for listening, and I'll keep you all posted if anything else happens. Take care, everyone. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.